in the shadowy corridors of history, where humanity's understanding teeters on the edge of enlightenment and fear, there stands an imposing edifice, the asylum, a symbol of refuge or a house of horrors. Hello intrepid explorers of the human psyche and compassionate healers of the heart. I'm Martin, your Danish male nurse. In this episode we journey through the dark and twisting tales of the Asylum Era. A time of contradiction where the intentions of sanctuary mingled with the chains of confinement. As the Renaissance awokened a thirst for knowledge and understanding the plight of the mentally ill began to stir the conscience of the few. It was a time when the first asylum opened their doors, a gesture of care or control. The lines were often a little blurry. Institutions like London's Bethlem Royal Hospital, known infamously as Bedlam, became synonymous with the era. Initially founded to house the distracted poor, it soon developed into a spectacle of suffering where the public could gaze upon the afflicted for prize. To give you an insight into the life of the asylum, let's set this story in the early 17th century, where in the streets of London it was not just bustling with commerce and the cries of street vendors, but also with the whispers of those grappling with unseen struggles of the mind. Amidst this, the notorious Bethlem Royal Hospital stood as a beacon of both hope and despair. Imagine, if you will, a young man named Edward, a tailor by trade, intelligent and well-read, yet plagued by what we might now recognize as schizophrenia. In a world without understanding, his vivid hallucinations and passionate speeches about unseen worlds led not to a doctor's care, but to the gates of Bedlam, as Bethlehem was colloquially known. Within these walls, Edward found himself not in the company of healers but jailers. The asylum ran more like a prison than a hospital. Upon his admission, Edward, like many of his time, was subjected to rudimentary and often brutal therapies. That was the hallmark of the early asylum care. Rotational therapy was one such treatment, based on the misguided belief that rapid spinning could realign the brain and cure mental illness. Yeah, it sounds a bit funny, but it was actually believed at the time. Edward would have been placed in a chair suspended from the ceiling, spun until dizziness and nausea overwhelmed him. A cruel form of treatment that brought only fear and confusion. Bleeding and purging were also common, a holdover from the belief in humoral imbalance. Physicians could draw blood, sometimes in large quantities, in an attempt to release the bad humors, thought to have caused the madness. Cold baths, too, were a mainstay of the asylum treatment. Edward would have been plunged into icy water, the shock of which was believed to jolt the senses back to normalcy. Instead, it often left patients numb both physically and emotionally. And imagine, people are actually paying to go into ice baths today, but they are not mentally ill, or are they? But back to the story, because there was the tranquillizer chair, not a tool of peace as its name might suggest, but an instrument of restraint. Edward would have been strapped in, immobilized, sometimes with a box over his head to limit sensory input, a practice that intended to calm but instead induced despair. These treatments, though barbaric to our modern sensibility, were the forefront of psychiatric care in the asylum era. They were methods born from a blend of limited knowledge and desperate need to control what was not understood. But even in such grim circumstances, there were those whose light refuses to be dimmed. fellow patients, suffering yet compassionate, shared what little they had. A crust of bread, a whispered word of comfort, even a shared tear for their collective plight. This camaraderie, this human connection, was often the only balm for their tormented souls. Edward's story, while fictional, is a composite of countless true experiences. It serves as a stark reminder of the journey mental health has traveled. Not all asylums were places of despair. Pioneers like Philippe Pinel in France and later Dorothea Dix in America rose against the tides of neglect. Pinel, renowned for ordering the removal of chairs from patients, believed in the healing power of compassionate and moral treatment. Their crusade for reform shed light on the darkness, pushing forward the radical notion that the mentally ill deserved dignity and treatment, not chains and spectacle. Treatments within these asylums varied widely, from hydrotherapy, where patients were dosed with water, to spinning chairs designed to induce dizziness and alter the mind state. The boundaries between treatment and torture were often indistinct. This era, steeped in both progress and pain, sets the stage for our understanding of mental health care. It was a period that both witnessed the best of intentions and the worst of executions, a reminder of the fine line between care and cruelty. As we leave the echoes of the asylum halls behind us, we carry forward the lessons of humanity and inhumanity. And join me over here where we explore the birth of modern psychiatric care in the 20th century, a time where science and compassion began to forge a new path for mental health care.